being picked up by a cable running down from the dome, and then boards linking between the poles. We don't know an enormous amount of detail about the scaffolding that Thornhill may have used, but we think probably it was a fairly opened scale system. And there is this wonderful story of Thornhill almost falling to his death that was only avoided by his loyal manservant Bentley French, who threw a bucket of paint at the wall to attract his attention and duly saved his life.
It's easy to see how you could topple over backwards, as the walls lean right out above you, pushing you towards the drop below. Thornhill would have had to overcome stomach-churning pangs of vertigo just to get the job done. It's an extraordinarily bizarre sense of scale that you get up here. If you look down there to that goldy thing, that's the Whispering Gallery, and then you've got the same distance below that to the floor, and you've got all the tiny, tiny little people like ants. Whereas up here, you've got this bloke who's got a head 3 times as big as ours. How on earth did Thornhill manage to get the scale right on this curving shape?
Well, that's a good question. We think probably he may have used a technique involving a grid and transferring from an original master drawing that was gridded up, a grid applied to the wall. And by that means you can actually transfer quite accurately the layout of your figures, correct proportion and in scale.
How much wall did he have to cover?
Well, we think they run about 140,000 square feet, so it's a vast space.
Just imagine how many cans of paint they'd have needed. And Thornhill would have had to haul them up ready mixed from ground level. There's almost no natural light up here, so he'd have been working by candlelight. It's incredibly claustrophobic at the very top, as the murals seem to press heavily down on you. To paint this bit, Thornhill would have been precariously dangling 75 metres above the marble floor below. It must have been so difficult working up here.
I think incredibly difficult. It is enormous acreage of painted surface, working under some very difficult circumstances, teetering on the edge of some rickety bit of scaffolding, very low light levels, having to work with finely detailed gilding, an immense achievement.
How many of them were there?
Well, records have it that in addition to Thornhill, he had incredibly only 2 assistants, which does seem quite extraordinary.
How long did it take them?
Well, it was 2 years, and I'm sure Thornhill was working flat out for that entire period.
But Thornhill must have been quite prepared to risk plummeting to his death every day for his magnificent painting. Indeed, he was so proud of it, he incorporated his very own portrait into one of the murals. But there's a sting in the tail. Thornhill worked up there hour after hour, month after month for his art, but he was comforted by the thought that when he'd finished, that place would be regarded as the British version of the Sistine Chapel, and it would be as much a monument to him as to Sir Christopher Wren. But ironically, by the time it was completed, the new frivolous Rococo fashion was all the rage, and suddenly Thornhill's work looked really drab and old-fashioned. So he did all that hard graft, and he never got any of the glory. That's what, for me, makes it a worse job. So, what job's on the very lowest rung of the Stuart period? Sedan chair bearing may have been physically demanding, but at least you were running your own business. Swallowing toads wouldn't have been as unpleasant as it sounds if you'd mastered the techniques of sleight of hand. And a saltpetre man's lot may have been smelly and unpopular, although you weren't likely to get blown up by your own explosives like the Petadier's assistant. But for me, the very worst job comes from the underside of the world of culture, the violin string maker. Now, you might be thinking, oh, violin string maker, very nice job. Well, you'll understand why it isn't when you see what's involved. The Stuart period was pivotal to the development of the violin as we know it because of technological advances in violin string making. It wasn't just virtuoso violinists that made Vivaldi famous. Oh no, it needed something just a little bit earthier. The guts of a sheep. The 17th century was the golden age of string making because of the development of a string short enough to fit a violin and play low notes, giving us the 4-stringed instrument we have today. String makers were precision craftsmen, often trained on the job in a family-run business. Although known as catgut strings, they were always made from sheep innards, and they're produced by twisting together strands of cleaned small intestine, first in pairs and then in 4s and so on. But unlike the modern string maker, 300 years ago they had to get their hands on their own raw materials, literally, which meant a series of unimaginably gory and gruesome tasks. and that's where I start my apprenticeship. I've come to a Stuart period farmhouse to find out just how bad it could be. Stuart!
Morning.
What do I cut this open with then?
Right, well, we need a knife. Best to start off with the small one there.
I'll tell you what I'm worried about more than anything else. These sleeves are so long and droopy, I think they're going to get...
Well, that's for keeping
messed
warm,
up
so
in the
I'd take the
door.
outer layer off and it should be easier then.
Give us a hand.
Gotcha.
How long's this one been dead?
Oh, not long. You can see it's still warm there.
Right, where do I plunge?
No. You're trying to kill a man if you're doing that.
Yeah.
And you finish up with bits everywhere that you don't want. You need a pinch and go through on the side, because we're just making a starting
And are we going
hole.
down or up?
You're going across and then we're going to cut down. That's it.
Am I coming
Cut
just towards
you.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just so you've got an incision. That's him.
Yeah.
Right, now we can find that spot. You're going to cut down,
Yeah.
like so.
No, it's not the
Odd
sharp
nipples,
side.
yeah, bits of nipples in the way. That's always the problem.
Oh, yes, and
don't go deep,
Yeah.
because if you penetrate the guts, we're going to finish up with grass soup inside and everything else.